Welcome back, everyone. It is one of the most remote places on the planet. And tonight, Greenland remains in the world.
There was an unexpected dispute for the territory of Greenland since Donald Trump returned to the White House. Denmark is not backing down. Even close nations are opinionated about a potential additional part of America. The Arctic's strategic value, untapped resources, and rising geopolitical tensions have made it a global hotspot. But what's the deal with this massive piece of ice? Is the territorial debate really worth it? What lies beneath Greenland's ice, and how rich is its soil? At first glance, Greenland might seem like nothing more than an enormous sheet of ice. And that's fair. About 80% of its surface is covered by ice, some of it over 3 kilometers thick. But what's underneath that icy blanket is a whole different story. Greenland is more than just frozen wasteland. It's a place of hidden landscapes, surprising geological riches, and untapped potential. Let's take a peek at the landscape beneath the ice. Under all that ice is a rugged, mountainous terrain, complete with valleys, fjords, and even what scientists believe could be an ancient mega-canyon longer than the Grand Canyon. Researchers using radar and satellite imagery have mapped out huge parts of this under-ice geography, revealing a landscape that once might have been full of rivers, forests, and maybe even life. Interestingly, Greenland wasn't always frozen. During certain warm periods millions of years ago, it likely had a temperate climate with vegetation, possibly even forests. That means that the land under the ice might hold ancient soil deposits, fossilized plant matter, and traces of life that could help scientists understand Earth's climate history. Now, let's talk about wealth. Because Greenland isn't just sitting on top of ancient history, it's also sitting on a lot of valuable stuff. Minerals and rare earth elements. Beneath Greenland's thick ice and scattered across its exposed rocky terrain lie vast reserves of untapped mineral wealth. Among the most strategically important are rare earth elements, REEs, a group of 17 metals that are crucial for producing a wide range of modern technologies. From smartphones and laptops to wind turbines, solar panels, electric vehicles, and even advanced military systems like guided missiles and stealth aircraft, REEs are the backbone of today's tech-driven world. What makes these elements so valuable isn't just their use, but their scarcity in accessible, economically viable deposits. While they're not technically rare in terms of occurrence, they're rarely found in concentrated forms that are easy to mine and process. This is where Greenland enters the global spotlight. Currently, China controls over 80% of the world's rare earth production and refining capacity. This has raised alarms in the US, the EU, and other industrial powers, who see their reliance on Chinese REEs as a significant geopolitical vulnerability. As global demand for green technologies skyrockets, the need for alternative, reliable sources of rare earths is becoming urgent. Greenland, with its largely unexplored mineral-rich land, is now being eyed as a possible solution to this growing supply chain dilemma. Several deposits, especially in the southern part of the island, have already shown promise. One notable site is the Kvanefjeld deposit in southern Greenland, which holds not just REEs but also uranium and zinc. It has been the focus of major international interest and some controversy because of its potential environmental impact. Greenland's government has taken a cautious but strategic stance. While the economic opportunities from mining are enormous, potentially generating jobs, infrastructure, and revenue for Greenland's semi-autonomous economy, there is also growing concern about environmental degradation, especially in a region already vulnerable to climate change. Additionally, debates over foreign influence, especially from countries like China, the US, and Australia, have made mining projects a hot-button political issue within Greenland itself. In short, Greenland's mineral wealth isn't just about rocks under ice. It sits at the center of a global chessboard, where climate, commerce, and international politics collide. The push to unlock these resources is building, But so are the questions. Who gets access? At what cost? And what will it mean for the future of this icy, isolated, yet incredibly valuable land? Gold, uranium, and other metals. Beyond rare earth elements, Greenland is also home to a wealth of other valuable minerals, including gold, uranium, zinc, iron ore, and even potential deposits of platinum and copper. These resources, many of which remain largely untapped, have made Greenland an increasingly attractive destination for international mining companies and foreign investors. Southern Greenland is of particular interest due to its relatively ice-free conditions and geologically promising terrain. The region has become the focus of several exploratory mining projects aimed at assessing the commercial viability of extracting these metals. One of the most talked about materials is uranium, a radioactive element used as fuel for nuclear power and in various military technologies. The presence of uranium often overlaps with rare earth deposits, which complicates mining operations, because extracting one usually means dealing with the other. This dual resource situation has sparked intense political and environmental debate within Greenland and abroad. Supporters argue that tapping into these resources could bring significant economic benefits. Greenland has long relied on fishing and block grants from Denmark to sustain its economy, so mining could offer a much-needed path toward greater financial independence and, potentially, full political independence. However, critics raise serious concerns about the environmental risks of uranium mining. Greenland's ecosystems are incredibly sensitive, with permafrost, freshwater systems, and Arctic wildlife all at risk from potential contamination. Uranium extraction involves handling radioactive materials, which could pose long-term health and ecological dangers if not managed with extreme care. Many locals worry about pollution, habitat destruction, and the irreversible impact on the land and water. In 2021, in response to growing public concern, Greenland's parliament passed a law banning uranium mining, effectively halting some of the most controversial projects, including the development of the Kvanefjeld deposit by an Australian mining company. This move sent a strong message. Greenland is not willing to trade environmental integrity for quick profits, at least not without serious public debate and regulation. That said, interest in gold and other less controversial metals remains high. Several smaller mining operations are already underway or in development stages, and international companies continue to show interest in Greenland's potential. With global demand for metals rising, driven by the tech boom, renewable energy development, and infrastructure growth, the pressure to open up more of Greenland's mineral wealth is only increasing. In the end, Greenland finds itself at a crossroads. The island holds the keys to critical materials that the world wants and needs, but unlocking them could come at a steep environmental and cultural cost. Balancing economic opportunity with ecological stewardship is the challenge, and the conversation is just getting started. Oil and natural gas. Offshore, beneath the frigid waters surrounding Greenland, lies another layer of potential wealth: oil and natural gas. Geological surveys, including those conducted by the U.S. Geological Survey, USGS, estimate that the Arctic region may hold up to 13% of the world's undiscovered oil and 30% of its undiscovered natural gas, and a sizable portion of that could be located in Greenland's territory. The waters off Greenland's west and northeast coasts are considered particularly promising. In the early 2000s and 2010, Greenland saw a flurry of interest from international oil companies, including big names like ExxonMobil, Chevron, and Cairn Energy. They were eager to explore these untouched regions, drawn by high oil prices and the lure of new, lucrative reserves. However, despite several exploratory drilling campaigns, the results were mixed, and no commercially viable discoveries were made. As oil prices fell and environmental scrutiny increased, many companies pulled out or put their Arctic ambitions on hold. Climate change has added a strange twist to this story. As global temperatures rise and Arctic sea ice melts, previously inaccessible areas are becoming easier and cheaper to explore and potentially extract from. This opens the door to offshore drilling projects that would have been considered impossible just a few decades ago. But it also raises a host of ethical and environmental questions. First, there's the irony. The same warming caused largely by fossil fuel emissions is now making it easier to extract more fossil fuels. This has sparked major criticism from environmentalists and climate scientists, who argue that exploiting Arctic oil and gas is a dangerous step backward in the fight against climate change. The Arctic is one of the most ecologically sensitive areas on Earth, and any oil spill in these icy, remote waters would be catastrophic and incredibly difficult to clean up. Second, there's the local debate within Greenland. On one hand, oil and gas revenues could bring enormous economic benefits to a territory looking to diversify its economy and reduce dependence on Denmark. For a population of just over 56,000 people, even a modest boom could mean significant income, job creation, and infrastructure development. On the other hand, many Greenlanders are deeply connected to the environment and traditional ways of life, such as fishing and hunting, which could be threatened by large-scale industrial activity. In recent years, the political tide in Greenland has shifted toward caution. In 2021, the Greenlandic government officially banned future oil exploration as part of a broader move toward environmental sustainability and renewable energy development. The decision was praised internationally and signaled a growing awareness that Greenland's long-term well-being might be better served by preserving its natural environment rather than extracting fossil fuels. Still, the potential remains. The oil and gas are still down there, and global energy markets are unpredictable. If geopolitical pressures shift, or if Greenland's economic situation changes drastically, the debate could resurface. For now, though, Greenland appears to be taking a more forward-thinking path, one that sees its future not buried in hydrocarbons but in sustainable development and environmental stewardship. Is Greenland's soil fertile? This one's a bit trickier. Most of Greenland's land isn't what we'd traditionally call fertile. The vast majority is buried under a thick ice sheet, and the parts that aren't, mainly along the southern and southwestern coasts, are rocky, mountainous, and often covered in permafrost, a layer of permanently frozen ground. That makes traditional agriculture challenging. The soil that does exist in these coastal areas tends to be thin, acidic, and not particularly rich in nutrients. Add in the short growing season and the harsh Arctic climate, and you've got a tough environment for farming. That said, climate change is altering this picture in real time. As temperatures rise and glaciers retreat, more land is being exposed, and for longer periods each year. In southern Greenland especially, farmers have started to experiment with crops like potatoes, turnips, carrots, and even strawberries during the summer months. Sheep farming has a long history in the region, dating back to Viking settlements, and today there are small but active communities raising livestock and producing hay. Some farmers are also experimenting with greenhouses and hardier crop varieties to push the boundaries of what's possible. What's fascinating is that Greenland's government has been actively exploring agricultural expansion as a form of economic development. With global warming creating longer growing seasons and exposing new arable land, there's a possibility, though controversial, that Greenland could one day support a more sustainable agricultural sector. However, this comes with a huge trade-off. The same warming that allows crops to grow is also contributing to rising sea levels, loss of ecosystems, and extreme weather events. So while the soil might become more usable over time, it's happening as part of a larger and more dangerous environmental shift. In a sense, Greenland's soil tells a double-sided story, one of opportunity and one of warning. The melting ice is uncovering land and resources that could support life and growth, but it's also a stark reminder of the global consequences of climate change. Greenland, where it truly belongs. When most people hear the name Greenland, they picture a giant frozen island somewhere in the North Atlantic, maybe with a few icebergs, some polar bears, and a handful of scientists braving the cold. But there's so much more to Greenland than its icy surface. It's a place with a long and fascinating history, a unique culture shaped by both Arctic survival and colonial influence, and a modern-day political status that sparks real debate. Who really owns Greenland? Is it just a piece of land under Denmark's control? Or does it belong to the people who've lived there for thousands of years? The answer, as you'll see, is layered, just like the ice that covers much of its land. Long before European explorers ever laid eyes on Greenland, it was already home to Arctic peoples. The first known settlers were the Paleo-Inuit, who migrated from what is now Canada and Alaska around 2500 BCE. These early Arctic cultures lived off the land, hunting whales, seals, and caribou, and gradually adapted to the extreme conditions of the far north. Over centuries, their descendants evolved into the Thule culture, which became the foundation of the modern Inuit populations. They brought advanced tools, dog sleds, and communal hunting techniques that helped them thrive in the harsh climate. But Greenland wasn't only home to indigenous peoples. Around 982 CE, the infamous Norse explorer Eric the Red arrived after being exiled from Iceland. He led a group of settlers to Greenland's southern coast and established farming communities there. He's also the one who named the place Greenland, likely as a clever marketing trick to make the land sound more appealing to future settlers. Spoiler, it's mostly ice. The Norse lived there for a few hundred years, building farms and churches, but their settlements eventually disappeared. Many historians believe climate change, economic isolation, and possibly conflict with the Inuit led to their decline. Meanwhile, the Inuit endured and remained the primary inhabitants of Greenland. Although the Norse vanished from Greenland, European interest in the island didn't end there. In the early 18th century, Denmark-Norway, then a dual monarchy, officially recolonized Greenland through missionary expeditions, led by people like Hans Egede. By 1721, Denmark had reasserted control, and over the next centuries, Greenland became a full colony within the Danish Empire. This wasn't a smooth or entirely welcomed transition. Danish authorities imposed European systems, religion, and trade practices that often disrupted traditional Inuit life. Throughout the 19th and early 20th centuries, Denmark continued to treat Greenland more as a resource outpost than a place with its own culture and agency. Indigenous Greenlanders faced discrimination, limited opportunities, and cultural erasure. It wasn't until 1953 that Greenland's status officially changed from a colony to a county within the Kingdom of Denmark, bringing it under the Danish constitution. But even then, control over key decisions, economy, infrastructure, education, remained centered in Copenhagen. How did this land become an autonomous territory? The path to independence. As the 20th century progressed, Greenlanders started pushing back. They demanded more control over their land, resources, and cultural identity. This led to a major turning point in 1979 when Greenland was granted home rule, giving it its own parliament and more autonomy over domestic affairs like education and healthcare. It was a big step, but the journey didn't end there. In 2009, Greenland took another leap forward with the Self-Government Act, which gave it control over even more areas, including the police, courts, natural resources, and the right to declare full independence if it chooses. Greenlanders now elect their own leaders, speak their own language, kalaallisut, and make decisions for their people. While Denmark still manages foreign policy, defense, and monetary policy, Greenland is increasingly self-governing, and that's exactly how many Greenlanders prefer it. This political progress is seen as part of a larger movement toward nationhood, even if the final step, full independence, hasn't been taken yet. But does Greenland really want independence? That's a complicated question, and the answer depends on who you ask. A large number of Greenlanders do support independence, and many feel a strong cultural pride in being Greenlandic first, not Danish. Greenland has its own language, traditions, and worldview, shaped by life in the Arctic and by centuries of indigenous knowledge. Politically and emotionally, a lot of people believe Greenland should stand on its own, free from foreign oversight. But there's also a practical side. Greenland currently receives an annual block grant from Denmark, worth about 3.9 billion Danish kroner, roughly $600 million USD. That money covers a large portion of Greenland's public services. Without it, Greenland would need to find new sources of income, likely from fishing, tourism, or potentially mining and oil exploration, industries that come with big environmental and ethical questions. So while independence is a powerful idea, the economic realities make it a slow and careful process. Right now, many Greenlanders seem to favor a gradual path, increasing autonomy step by step until full independence becomes more viable. Technically, Greenland is still part of the Kingdom of Denmark. It's an autonomous territory, which means it governs itself in most areas, but remains under Danish sovereignty in key aspects like foreign relations and defense. Denmark owns Greenland on paper, but in practice, Greenland is charting its own course. It has its own flag, official language, and elected government. In international organizations, it sometimes participates alongside Denmark, but also separately in areas like Arctic diplomacy. The truth is, Greenland belongs to the people who live there, primarily the Inuit majority who have deep historical and cultural roots in the land. Over time, legal ownership matters less than political will and cultural identity. And as Greenland continues to build its economy and national institutions, the momentum toward full nationhood may grow even stronger. Denmark has said that it will not stand in the way if Greenland chooses to become independent. So when that day comes, the decision will rest entirely with Greenlanders themselves. It's not just a frozen island on the edge of the world. It's a place where ancient indigenous cultures meet modern politics, where the struggle for self-determination is very much alive. Yes, Greenland is technically tied to Denmark, but it has been reclaiming its voice and autonomy with every passing decade. The journey toward full independence might be slow, but it's steady and rooted in the strength, resilience, and pride of the Greenlandic people. America's hope to own the land of ice. Greenland's political leaders have strongly criticized planned visits by top US officials, as former President Donald Trump continues to make statements about taking control of the island since 2019. Now, in his second term, the hope remains. Will it turn into a chaotic and forced invasion? Recently, Second Lady Usha Vance is scheduled to make a cultural visit to Greenland, and National Security Advisor Mike Waltz is also expected to travel there soon. These visits have been labeled aggressive by outgoing Greenlandic Prime Minister Mute Egide, who expressed concern over their timing and intent. The trips come shortly after Greenland's centre-right Democratic Party unexpectedly won the recent general election. The campaign was heavily influenced by discussions around the island's potential independence and renewed US interest in Greenland's strategic value. Though Greenland is still a self-governing territory under the Kingdom of Denmark, the topic of full independence dominated political debate leading up to the election. Currently, the island's economy relies heavily on fishing, and about 20% of its GDP comes from Danish subsidies. In recent years, global interest in Greenland's natural resources, such as rare earth minerals, uranium, and iron ore, has grown significantly. As climate change causes parts of the island's massive ice sheet to melt, these valuable materials may become easier to access, adding to the region's geopolitical importance. Why does Greenland matter to US? The United States has had strategic security interests in Greenland for decades. During World War II, when Nazi Germany took control of mainland Denmark, the US responded by moving into Greenland, setting up military installations and radio communications stations across the island. Even after the war ended, American forces didn't leave. The US has continuously operated Pituffik Space Base, formerly Thule Air Base, since then. Under a 1951 defense agreement with Denmark, the US was granted broad rights to help defend Greenland, including permission to build and manage military bases there. According to Mark Jacobson, an associate professor at the Royal Danish Defence College, Greenland holds immense strategic value. If Russia launched missiles at the US, the fastest route would be over the North Pole and through Greenland. That's why Pituffik is crucial for American defense. Recently, both Russia and China have stepped up their military activity in the Arctic. A report from the Arctic Institute warned that the US needs to expand its Arctic presence to keep up with its geopolitical rivals. In response to these developments, Danish Foreign Minister Lars Løkke Rasmussen acknowledged in January that the US has legitimate interests in Greenland and said Denmark is open to further dialogue with Washington. "We're watching a rearming Russia," Rasmussen said. "We're also seeing growing Chinese interest." Jacobson also noted that former President Donald Trump is likely attracted to Greenland's mining potential, particularly the rare earth minerals found in the island's southern regions, resources that are becoming increasingly valuable on the global stage. In a recent address to Congress, Donald Trump emphasized that gaining control of Greenland was crucial not only for US national security, but also for global stability. While he affirmed his support for the Greenlandic people's right to choose their own future, he made it clear that if they opted to join the US, they would be welcomed. Though Trump's remarks may have sounded unusual to some, the idea of acquiring Greenland is far from new. In fact, multiple US presidents have pursued the island over the past 100-plus years. According to Lucas Warden, author of the Arctic-focused newsletter 66° North, the US has repeatedly tried to sideline Denmark and gain full control, or at least full security oversight, of Greenland. Back in 1867, shortly after the US bought Alaska from Russia, then Secretary of State William H. Seward led early negotiations to purchase Greenland from Denmark. However, no agreement was reached. Later, in 1946, the US made a formal offer of $100 million, about $1.2 billion today, to buy Greenland, considering it a critical strategic asset. Denmark turned down the proposal. Trump made a similar attempt during his first term in office in 2019, publicly expressing interest in purchasing the island. The idea was swiftly rejected by both the Danish government and Greenland's leadership, who issued a firm response. Greenland is not for sale. What do people think? The conversation around Greenland's independence has intensified significantly in recent years, with Trump's renewed interest in the island acting as a major catalyst, says Masana Egidi, editor of the Greenlandic newspaper Samitsiak. Trump has put the debate on steroids, he noted. Recent polling shows that nearly 80% of Greenlanders support becoming independent from Denmark. However, when it comes to the idea of joining the United States, the sentiment is overwhelmingly negative. A survey conducted in January revealed that 85% of respondents were against becoming part of the US, with only 6% in favor and the rest undecided. During a visit to Greenland earlier this year, BBC correspondent Fergal Keane reported hearing the same phrase repeated by locals. Greenland belongs to Greenlanders. Trump can visit, but that's all. The topic of sovereignty became a major focal point during the recent election. Outgoing Prime Minister Mute Egede expressed frustration with how the US president had treated the island. "We deserve to be treated with dignity, and I don't think President Trump has done that since taking office," he said during his campaign. Egede has long advocated for breaking free from what he calls the shackles of colonialism, though he favors a step-by-step path to full autonomy. In contrast, the Nalarak opposition party pushed for a more immediate separation from Denmark and sought to strengthen defense ties with the US. Following the surprising election outcome, Jens Frederik Nielsen, leader of the winning Democratic Party and likely Greenland's next prime minister, called for unity. Greenland needs us to come together, especially now that so many outside forces are taking an interest in our land, he said. When Trump initially floated the idea of buying Greenland in 2019, many residents were quick to voice their disapproval. Denise Mikkelsen, a lifelong resident and tour guide from Tasiilaq in eastern Greenland, described it as a very dangerous idea. Denmark's defense. Just last week, Denmark's parliament moved closer to ratifying a defense cooperation agreement with the United States, which would expand US military rights in the Nordic nation. This development comes despite ongoing diplomatic tensions between the two allies over Greenland. The 10-year agreement, signed in 2023 during Joe Biden's presidency, would allow US forces to station troops and store military equipment on Danish territory. However, public opinion in Denmark has shown strong resistance to the deal. Relations between the two countries were strained after former US President Donald Trump suggested that the United States should acquire Greenland, a semi-autonomous Danish territory rich in resources. Both Denmark and Greenland firmly rejected the idea. Still, the Danish government argues that the agreement is vital for strengthening national defense, particularly in light of growing security concerns in Europe due to Russia's ongoing war in Ukraine. Prime Minister Mette Frederiksen and members of her Social Democratic Party have defended the pact as essential for maintaining Denmark's role within NATO. It would be extremely unwise to reject one of the most significant defense agreements in recent years and risk distancing ourselves from the United States, said Simon Kollerup, a lawmaker from Frederiksen's party. Frederiksen echoed this sentiment earlier in the week, emphasizing the importance of NATO membership to Europe's defense and Denmark's commitment to it. While left-leaning parties, such as the Alternative and the Red-Green Alliance, oppose the agreement, it is still expected to be approved with backing from several opposition parties outside the ruling minority government. Notably, the agreement does not extend to Greenland or the Faroe Islands, two autonomous Danish territories in the North Atlantic. The US already has extensive access in Greenland through a defense agreement dating back to the 50s. What's the real future for Greenland? Rather than becoming part of the United States, Greenland's future is more likely headed toward full independence. With more control over its economy, growing national identity, and international recognition, Greenland is gradually stepping out from Denmark's shadow. It already manages most of its internal affairs, and with smart use of its resources, balanced by environmental care, it could become an independent nation within a few decades. That being said, Greenland's strategic importance means it will continue to attract attention from superpowers like the US, China, and Russia. The key question isn't who will own Greenland, but rather how Greenland will navigate the growing interest in its land, resources, and location while protecting its own sovereignty. So, could America take over Greenland? Not really, and not rightfully. While the idea has popped up now and then, the truth is that Greenland is not for sale, not seeking to be part of the US, and not interested in repeating colonial history under a new flag. Greenlanders have a strong sense of identity, and the future of their homeland belongs to them, not to the highest bidder. In an age where self-determination matters more than ever, Greenland stands as a reminder that even in the coldest places on Earth, the people's voice is what truly matters. Thanks for watching the video. See you in the next one.